last week's video, we looked at Tom Riddle through his Hogwarts years until he graduated. Let's pick up with what happened after he left. So after graduating, he immediately approached Headmaster Dippet and asked for a chance to teach Defense Against the Dark Arts and to remain at Hogwarts. However, he didn't actually confide his reasons with the headmaster as to why he wanted this job. Hogwarts was his true home at heart, and he wanted to use the influential position as a teacher to recruit students into his army, but also to continue learning the castle's magical secrets. Dippet actually rejected this offer, deeming that Riddle was too young, but he did invite Riddle to reapply in a few years' time. Dumbledore actually heavily advised against this, however. Shortly before he left Hogwarts, however, Riddle charmed Helena Ravenclaw, the daughter of Rowena Ravenclaw, and the ghost of Ravenclaw House, into telling him the location of her mother's diadem, which she revealed as a hollow tree deep within a far-flung forest in Albania. He travelled there at her instruction, where he murdered a priest on the way, retrieved the diadem, and then preserved part of his soul in it, creating the third Horcrux. Upon his return to Britain, Riddle was actually offered several positions at the Ministry of Magic, but he turned them all down, instead taking a job at Borgin and Burkes, and this really surprised a lot of people. He was very good at his job, persuading witches and wizards to part with their valuable objects. While working at Borgin and Burkes, Riddle befriended Hepzibah Smith, a wealthy and elderly descendant of Helga Hufflepuff. Between 1955 and 1961, Smith showed Riddle her two most valuable treasures, her ancestor's locket and her ancestor's cup. Tom was besotted with these objects, and unfortunately his greedy side came out. He believed the locket to be his, because he was Slytherin's heir, it was rightfully his, and he wanted the cup as a memento from his time at Hogwarts. Using poison, Riddle murdered Smith, took the objects and vanished without a trace. He again covered his tracks fairly well by altering the memory of Hokey, which was Smith's house elf. Hokey admitted to accidentally poisoning Smith by putting something in her drink, and this was actually believed because Hokey was quite old herself and was believed to be senile. Meanwhile, as I said, Riddle actually resigned his post at Borgin and Burkes and vanished immediately. And as we know, he turned these two items into Horcruxes, using the murders of Smith and an unidentified Muggle tramp. Riddle then disappeared for 10 years. He slipped further and further into the dark arts, and he started to change in appearance. Having split his soul so many times, he lost that handsomeness that he'd had and started to go by the name Lord Voldemort more openly. He also severed all contact with Slughorn, who became upset for not living up to the Potion Master's employment offers. 10 years after Smith's death, Riddle appealed once more to the headmaster of Hogwarts, who was actually Dumbledore now, for the position of Defense Against the Dark Arts. After a short chat, Dumbledore actually confronted Riddle directly as to why he wanted the position, because he actually knew that Riddle had no desire whatsoever to teach. Riddle wasn't actually able to answer Dumbledore because his true intentions were so malicious and deceitful, and he just simply left after that. However, from that day, Hogwarts was never able to keep a Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher for more than a year. This was a curse that Riddle gave to Dumbledore as a parting gift, if you like. But the visit to Hogwarts wasn't actually fruitless, because Riddle took the opportunity to put the diadem in the Room of Requirement, where he believed it would never ever be found. Voldemort, as he exclusively went by now, spent the next few years gathering witches and wizards who had become what we know as the Death Eaters. Some were supportive of his cause to dominate Muggle and Muggle-kind and Muggle-borns, while others were greedy for domination, wealth and fame. But others actually joined him out of just fear. Voldemort didn't see these people as friends or family, merely servants to do his bidding. According to Sirius Black, Voldemort also used curses, jinxes and hexes to get people to willingly join him, along with things like blackmail as well. At some point around this time, Voldemort greatly enhanced his skills in legilimency, to the point that Snape claimed he was the most accomplished legilimens the world had ever seen. Voldemort could read, control and unhinge the minds of others, and could almost always tell when he was being lied to. According to Snape, Voldemort often enjoyed invading the minds of others, creating visions designed to torture them into madness. Only after he had them literally begging for death would he actually finally kill them. He would let them suffer until that point. In 1970, Voldemort started the First Wizarding War. He took advantage of one of the Wizarding world's greatest weaknesses, the beings and creatures that they had outcast. He recruited the giants, who had long ago been driven by wizardkind into the mountain, and werewolves, who were persecuted by many witches and wizards. Many feared that the goblins would also join him, as they were restricted from wand use, but they never did. In fact, Voldemort actually murdered a family of goblins near Nottingham at some point during the war for some unknown reason. It's safe to say that Voldemort's army caused widespread destruction and mayhem during the war. Bartolomew's Crouch Sr. was the head of Department of Magical Law Enforcement at the time and was widely known for his hatred of the dark arts. He actually issued almost like a pardon that allowed Aurors to use the unforgivable curses on Death Eaters without warning, and sometimes suspects were handed over to the Dementors without a trial. Many innocent people were also locked away. Due to the atrocities caused by Voldemort and the Death Eaters, many people didn't want to refer to him by name, and therefore the moniker of He Who Must Not Be Named, or You Know Who, was created. Dumbledore was the only person that Voldemort truly feared. Hogwarts remained a safe place of learning throughout the entire war. The Order of the Phoenix was created by Dumbledore at the time to fight against Voldemort, and the war itself lasted for 11 years. In 1979, Voldemort wanted to test the defences around his Horcruxes to make sure that they couldn't be gotten to. So he placed Slytherin's locket in a cave and asked Regulus Black if he could use his house elf creature. Voldemort took the elf with him to the cage, forced him to drink the emerald potion, and left him to die on that Crystal Cave Island. Creature was able to escape, however, using house elf magic, and actually told Regulus of what had happened. Over the years, Voldemort created an army of Inferi from the people he had killed to further strengthen his defences. At the point where Regulus learned about what Voldemort had done, he decided to defect. From clues left behind by Voldemort, he was able to deduce what his master was doing. He was trying to become immortal by creating these Horcruxes. So he made a duplicate locket, put a note inside, and told Creature to take him to the cave, where we know he replaced the real locket with this fake one. During this time as well, Voldemort actually gave his old diary to Lucius Malfoy, but he never told him it was a Horcrux and that it contained a part of his soul. He did tell him that the diary was cleverly charmed, and smuggling it into Hogwarts would cause the Chamber of Secrets to open again. And then he went to Bellatrix Lestrange and took Hufflepuff's cup with him as well. And much like her brother-in-law, she was ordered to hide it, so she stored it in her family vault in Gringotts. She treated the object with extreme priority. However, Voldemort actually hadn't told it was a Horcrux, but we know it's insinuated that Bellatrix has unfavouring loyalty and possibly love for him anyway. Around this time as well, Voldemort took the ring back to Gaunt's shack. He placed the ring inside a golden box and hid it beneath the rotting floorboard, setting up many protective enhancements around it to prevent people from coming in and finding it. He also placed a powerful curse on the ring that would quickly lead to the death of the ring's wearer if it wasn't controlled. 10 years into the war, when Voldemort was at the height of his dominion, a prophecy was given by Sybil Trelawney to Albus Dumbledore, which predicted the fall of the Dark Lord. The prophecy was given in the Hog's Head during an interview for the position of Professor of Divination. What an interview that would have been, how impressive. The prophecy was overheard by Death Eater and informant Severus Snape. According to Dumbledore, however, Snape only actually heard part of the prophecy, and he was then thrown out by Aberforth Dumbledore. He relayed to Voldemort what he had heard, not realising he'd actually missed out a really important part of that message. Regardless, Voldemort received just part of the prophecy, and because he was feeling threatened, he did actually jump into action. At the time, as we know, there are two babies for which the prophecy could be true about. We had Harry Potter, Lily James's son, or Neville Longbottom, son of Alice and Frank. Voldemort actually chose to target Harry instead of Neville, and Dumbledore suspected this was because Harry shared a similar family heritage with Voldemort, with them both being half-bloods. Sometime after Harry's birth is when Peter Pettigrew started working for Voldemort as a Death Eater. On Halloween 1981, Pettigrew told Voldemort of their location. He travelled to Godric's Hollow, and with the charm broken to protect the Potters from being found, he just simply walked into the house. Once inside, he murdered James and Lily, who didn't actually have their wands to hand. However, when he used the killing curse on Harry, it rebounded and seemingly obliterated his body. Now we know this happened because Lily sacrificed herself to save her son. After 11 years of war and domination, Voldemort was finally defeated. For the first time at least. Now we know at this point that Harry was then created as a Horcrux, and this is because Voldemort had split his soul so many times that when he was obliterated, a small bit of soul that was left latched onto the only living thing it could find, which was Harry. This is what actually gave Harry some of Voldemort's powers, so things like Parseltongue, but also the ability to be able to see into Voldemort's mind. After Voldemort first fell, a lot of the Death Eaters returned to normal life, a lot of them saying they'd been under the Imperius Curse and they didn't actually mean to do it. We know that Lucius Malfoy used that excuse as well, that they weren't in their right mind, it was all a trick. Some of the Death Eaters actually did stay loyal to Voldemort and continued his work, like Bellatrix, for example. Others were taken into custody, convicted at trial and imprisoned in Azkaban, and again that happened to Bellatrix. Most of them, however, did manage to remain free and reintegrate into society. Now Voldemort lost his physical form and his powers, but he was still like a ghostly blob, if you like. The Horcruxes had actually kept his spirit bound to the physical world, so he retreated back to the Forest of Albania, where he had previously found his 5th Horcrux and waited for his Death Eaters to find him. But many of them now believed he was actually dead, and those still faithful to him were either dead or in Azkaban. But he had one power left, the power of possession. He gained physical form by inhabiting animals, mostly snakes, but he disliked doing so because these animals were ill-equipped to perform magic. But also, when he possessed an animal, it significantly reduced their lifespan. So none of his hosts survived for too long and he was then forced back into spirit form. Voldemort didn't dare enter the communities to possess humans, as he knew that auras were still abroad looking for any signs of him. So in 1991, Voldemort forged a plan to regain his body. Professor Quirrell was in Albania, where his foolish and gullible mind was vulnerable to Voldemort. He latched onto Quirrell's body and came back to England with him. And then we know the events of the Philosopher's Stone occurred. Now after this, Voldemort again returned back to the Albanian forest, but now he was weaker than ever. He had to yet again wait for someone to help him, and this time it was in the form of Lucius Malfoy and that diary. Around this time, Arthur Weasley had increased raids on homes, so Lucius was obviously concerned about this diary being found, and he did start taking a lot of his darker possessions to Borgin and Burkes for safekeeping. It was at this time that he also slipped the diary into Ginny Weasley's cauldron. Malfoy had a plan to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. A, it would get rid of this diary that he had, and B, it would also discredit Arthur Weasley. In 1994, Voldemort had given up hope of obtaining any help from his former servant. But at this time, Pettigrew had also faked his own death and hid from authorities in the form of his rat, Animagus. And then he travelled to Albania. He was tired from travelling and he was hungry, so Pettigrew decided to stop in an inn for something to eat, where he was recognised by Bertha Jorkins, who actually worked for the Ministry of Magic, and she was on holiday in Albania. Although she recognised him, Pettigrew actually lured her into Voldemort's forest before attacking her, and he handed her over to Voldemort, who tortured her. And he was really surprised to find out that someone had put a really powerful memory charm on her. After breaking the charm, Voldemort learnt that the Triwizard Cup would be held at Hogwarts that year, and that Alistair Moody, an ex-Auror, will be teaching defence against the dark arts. She also revealed to him that Bartimus Crouch Jr., who was one of his most loyal Death Eaters, had been imprisoned in Azkaban and was thought to be dead. But he then found out that he was actually alive. Bartimus Crouch Sr. was concealing his son at home, having helped him escape jail. Jorkins had actually stumbled upon Crouch Jr. while visiting the home, so Bartimus Crouch Sr. put a memory charm on her. Voldemort wasn't able to possess Bertha's body because of the spells that had been put on her and the damage it had caused, so he just killed her. Shortly after this, he turned Nagini into his last Horcrux. So Voldemort then decided that he wouldn't be able to use the Philosopher's Stone because Dumbledore would destroy it. He decided to attempt a piece of old dark magic to create a potion that would restore him to a body. He made plans to travel to England in order to obtain 2 of the 3 ingredients: a bone from his father and the blood from his most hated enemy, Harry Potter. The 3rd ingredient, the flesh of a servant willingly given, he had obtained from Wormtail himself. Voldemort and Wormtail went to the Crouch estate, where Voldemort placed Crouch Senior under the Imperious Curse and freed Crouch Junior for good. Voldemort ordered Crouch Junior and Pettigrew to capture Moody at his home, and they placed Moody under the Imperious Curse and created the Polyjuice Potion, which was how he was able to impersonate Moody for the entire school year. When Crouch Senior started to show signs of resisting the Imperious Curse, Voldemort decided it was no longer safe to actually allow him to leave the house and basically put him under house arrest under the guise of being unwell. In late May of 1995, Crouch Senior continued to resist the Imperious Curse and actually managed to escape through Wormtail's negligence. Voldemort quickly alerted Crouch Jr. to stop his father at all costs, as he believed that Crouch was intending to tell Dumbledore about everything. Upon Crouch Jr.'s success, Voldemort spared Pettigrew from being given to Nagini as meat, instead opting to punish him with Cruciatus Curse. After regaining his body, Voldemort travelled to Azkaban and freed several of his most loyal Death Eaters, such as Bellatrix Lestrange. Voldemort had very little trouble with this, as many of the Dementors were actually happy to join him. After this, the Dark Wizards and the Death Eaters regained their place at his side. So that's all, guys, for part 2 of the story. We will be doing part 3 next week, where we discuss the Wizarding War and what happened up until his downfall. Like the video, guys. If you like the video, do hit that subscribe so you don't miss out any of the other content I've got coming out this year. And until next time, you take care.